Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the eighth masterclass of the India Forum for Nature-Based Solutions Masterclass series. Today's session is titled The Value of Ecosystem Services in the Urban Landscape. I'm Shaurya Mal, and I support the Secretariat for the India Forum for NBS. Before we dive in, I'd like to briefly introduce the forum. The forum is a coalition of research, practice, and finance organizations committed to scaling up the adoption of NBS to shape climate resilient cities and communities in India. Through knowledge sharing and discussions like this masterclass series, we aim to equip stakeholders with practical insights and strategies to implement NBS effectively in our cities. In this masterclass, we are focusing on the critical importance of valuing ecosystem services in urban context. Ecosystem services like air and water purification, climate regulation, carbon sequestration, and biodiversity conservation are foundational to human well-being. And as cities expand and environmental pressures mount, it becomes increasingly important to recognize, quantify, and integrate the value of these services into planning and investment decisions. Traditionally, valuation efforts have focused on non urban ecosystems such as forests and wetlands, but this session brings a new lens, one that considers urban natural assets and their potential to deliver long term economic, social, and ecological benefits. Today's session will walk you through key frameworks for valuing ecosystem services, methodologies for quantifying these services in urban areas, a hands on example of how this valuation plays out in practice, and also the challenges and limitations of applying these approaches in the urban context. Um, Now, let me introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Uday Bhonde, a senior program specialist at the National Institute of Urban Affairs. Uday brings over a decade of experience working in the urban sector with a focus on water, climate, and disaster risk reduction. Uday holds a doctorate in geology, a postgraduate diploma in urban planning and development, and was awarded a research scholarship by the Department of Science and Technology, New Delhi. Prior to working at NIUA, he served as a deputy program manager at Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. Joining him is Nikita Madan, a senior environmental specialist at NIUA. And Nikita is an accomplished environmental planner from the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, with over a decade of experience spanning international organizations, government bodies, NGOs, and academic institutions. Her expertise includes water sensitive planning, river rejuvenation, economics of urban ecosystems, climate adaptation, and mitigation. At NIUA, she leads initiatives across urban water and environment sectors, developing strategic frameworks, digital tools, and capacity building programs. Her notable contributions include frameworks like the Making River Sensitive Master Plans, the Urban River Management Plan, and the Draft Master Plan for Delhi 2041. Welcome to both of you. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. We will take questions after the presentation. Please share your questions in the Q&A section as the session progresses. This session is being recorded and will be made available for future reference on YouTube, as well as will be shared to your registered email addresses. Um, with that, let's move on to the presentation segment. I now invite our speakers to begin their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaurya, for the introduction and also inviting us. Thank you, WRI, for having us for this master class. NIUA and WRI are part of this particular India forum for the NBS, and we work closely to do to bring all the stakeholders together and work in this space and to do some change at the policy level. That's the overall idea. NIUA stands for the National Institute of Urban Affairs, and NIUA is autonomous institution under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. NIUA tries to support ministry and particularly the cities to actually improve overall urban sector and overall urban development pace in the city. So it is a sustainable in nature, and also it is more inclusive in nature. So that's what NIUA do. So with me is my colleague, as Shaurya has already introduced. So we both will try to take you through this particular valuation of ecosystem or value of ecosystem session, and we'll try to share our experience. And considering the audience, I'm sure the audience must be, there might be some individual who must be at the very advanced stage of understanding these kind of topics, and there could be some who are students or trying to understand these things. So we have tried to balance the presentation in terms of its content so that it's balanced, not too advanced stage and not too even elementary stage. So that's what we'll try to do in next 25-30 minutes. We'll share our experience with you, and then onwards we'll discuss as an open discussion. Should we share our presentation?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Fine. So these are the pictures which are from our project cities in which we are, doing this particular ecosystem valuation. So beautiful landscape, urban mix, and that's what we'll try to share. So these are some of the pictures from that particular thing. Yes. So as I said, NIUA, so particularly we represent the water and environment vertical. Our overall mission is to help cities to enhance their water security and also, environmentally responsible development that they, take in the cities. Cities are rapidly developing, particularly the developing countries. So India is, of course, moving towards the developed stage, but it's rapidly growing. So we try to help cities by, coming up with the national frameworks, various tools and toolkits which different stakeholders can use, particularly the urban local body officials or municipality officials. We try to bring some kind of, evidence-based research. Our capacity building is a core activity that we do. We develop very niche training modules for the desired target group. Of course, we also work with the citizens. So this is a whole scope of work for the water and environment vertical, and now we are slowly also progressing towards the environmental as one of the core field that we have been doing. This will be overall a presentation outline as Shaurya has already indicated. So first we'll try to cover some basic aspect related to the value of ecosystem. What is its significance, particularly in the urban context? Which are different frameworks available, some methods to estimate the ecosystem services in terms of direct and indirect benefits. We will take a very good case example that we are already doing in our current project, and some challenges. What are the key challenges that we actually have encountered, and then finally we'll do some kind of a discussions and take some questions for and we'll try to answer those questions. So these are some of the words that we come across nowadays: climate change impact, heat stress, urban flooding, particularly the with the post monsoon, water scarcity in the city, particularly in the summer seasons. And then we also try to develop the resiliency. What are the resiliency measures? What are the adaptation measures that cities can adopt? And also the nature-based solutions. These are the words which now quite often we are hearing. And along with that, we are also hearing the ecosystem based adaptation practices which are more sustainable overall. Globally it has been witnessed that ecosystem based adaptation is more sustainable. Of course it has its own pace, but anyway, it cannot beat the infrastructure, it cannot beat the conventional approaches, but this is the way in future if at all we want to prepare our cities more climate resilience. So if in general we want to understand ecosystem based adaptation, then overall it combines the ecosystems and biodiversity associated with it, and also tries to understand the ecosystem services in terms of climate, biological or social factors. And then when we combine this, it becomes more equipped adaptation strategy for any, particularly the urban sector. And this is the CBD's approach, because there's a clear cut definition, but this graphics is to just capture what overall adaptation strategy in terms of ecosystem adaptation means. Uh, then particularly if we talk about the urban setup, which is more complex, dynamic in nature, is EBA possible in this kind of setup where the land is for high value, resources are limited? So is it possible in an urban setup? That we'll try to see. And very importantly, there are two things which I would like to highlight here is there are two terms: nature-based adaptation or solution adaptation. Now, when nature-based solutions, it clearly says they are the actions to protect, sustainably manage, or restore the dilapidated ecosystem in the cities. Of course, for these three benefits: biodiversity benefits, societal, and humankind. When we look at the ecosystem-based adaptation, it is more towards the strategy which combines biodiversity and leverages it, and also takes ecosystem services which benefits the people, and it's overall integrated approach of land, water, and living resources. So this is the primary difference which we should understand. And why we actually are talking about and we are able to share these experiences, because NIUA being the agency which works with the city, we thought that we should try to adopt these kind of futuristic kind of approaches which are the need of our hour. So we are actually working with a project supported by Global EBA Fund called Proliferating Ecosystem Based Adaptation Practices in Indian Cities. So in short, we call it as an EPIC project. So primarily we try to address the climate risks with this kind of ecosystem based adaptation, especially flooding or water scarcity. And then three components which we have in the project are valuation of ecosystem in urban landscape, nature-based solutions, site-specific nature-based solution, and to develop a very comprehensive database for the urban local body. Overall, this will improve the awareness among the citizens and also the functionaries, because they are more in a pace of firefighting, or they are more dependable on the conventional approaches. But then these kind of approaches they should be aware. So this is one of the core component of the project, and also to influence the evidence-based research for the larger cohort of the Indian cities. And this is the overall aim, how we can mainstream this in the urban agenda for the overall better water management. uh, if we understand the value of nature, now if we come to the topic that we have chosen today, so there are two kind of values that we have. One is purely a biocentric, where everything what nature has an inner value, independent from any benefit for the mankind. For example, pollination. For example, the forest in its natural stage, not the cultivated. But when we look at the anthropocentric approach, where we as a human being wants to get benefit out of the nature, it is more towards us, not for the nature to be independent of any such kind of values. So the key question which I would like to hear, pose here is, if there is a forest, a natural forest, should we leave it like that in a natural state to do its natural functions, or it should be cultivated for our benefit? So that's where the fundamental question lies. And there is a also approach of a sustainable development. Of course we are developing, but then should we, at what cost we should develop? That is what we should understand. And nature gives a direct as well as indirect benefit, which we try to leverage, or we try to monitor. uh, if we look at the definition of ecosystem services, Robert Costanza, very famous environmental economist, has very precisely put this definition. There are many definitions, but which I picked one is like it's services, ecosystem services that benefit people from the functions of ecosystem. Like for example, if there is a forest, whether it gives a medicinal plant, it gives the fruits, it gives a timber. So these are the benefits that we try to leverage, and its functions which are either directly or indirectly benefiting us. So that's the a definition of ecosystem services. And in general, natural capital is sometimes referred as, I mean, each thing has a capital or a stock value. So we try to leverage the natural capital based on the ecosystem services. You will certainly find a lot of definitions, but this definition is more suiting to the our context. So that's what I thought I'll cover. Many of you might be aware that ecosystem services are broadly divided on the Millennium Assessment Framework, which my colleague Nikita will take into slight detail. So four: provisional, regulating, cultural, and supporting services. These are the four broad categories of services. And in red, I have highlighted, for example, if we say a regulating services, it's like water purification with constructed wetland or a natural wetland, erosion prevention with the natural riparian buffer, or carbon storage. These are some regulating services. Or supporting services, when we say water recycling, soil formation, these are some of the supporting services. Of course, we'll take in a slighter detail, but these are the fundamental or pillar of the ecosystem service valuation, which is adopted internationally. And this has this has been covered in further detail. uh, just let me give you one example. If we have a riverine island, I mean, it's very, in general, we see the River Island, but it offers a lot of services. Some of the services are like, say, for example, the thatching roof. If some grasses are dried up, they are converted into thatching roofs, which are very essential component of building any hut. A fuel wood, fruits, and many other benefits that River Island can offer. But then this needs to be listed down, and this has been a very important component of any ecosystem services. So we'll give you a very better example from the urban domain, but that's how the riverine island provides you the services. In India, if we particularly talk about the Indian landscape, there are a lot of studies which are being taken on the ecosystem service valuation. But this particular radar diagram very clearly says, this is based on some research article. So it says that urban ecosystems are very less studied compared to the natural one, that is the highest category of research, particularly research and other kind of assessment. So urban ecosystem certainly needs to be very well covered, and it has there is a lot of scope to work in the urban ecosystem. uh, Finally, some key questions for us today. When we say urban ecosystem, there is a there is a system which works, and the decision makers are there, policy makers are them. How they appreciate this, how they understand about the ecosystem, that's the very key challenge that we actually also have witnessed. So that's the key question, how we can convince, and what are the methods that we'll cover, I mean, in due course of time. So that is one avenue. Should we do the ecosystem valuation to do the economic benefits, I mean, to do the lot of fish production or timber production, or actually we should try to value them in terms of ecosystem protection, in terms of a trade-offs, how we should see the ecosystem valuation. And of course, how do we quantify these things, particularly the co-benefit, because if you look at the carbon sequestration, it's not that simple to quantify, but it is a very critical co-benefit, a very important co-benefit. A base flow from the groundwater aquifers to the river, how do we quantify? But it happens. So these are some of the co-benefits of ecosystems, but then these are the key questions with which we actually started to work. So here I will end, and I will I'll pass it to my colleague Nikita, who will try to cover how we do these things in a practical way, particularly in the urban landscape, particularly our experience with the IUCN Global EBA Fund project that we are doing with the one of the cities. So thank you, and over to you, Nikita.
Thank you so much, Uday. So, just to further take it ahead, what I'll be covering is not theory about ecosystem services, because that you'll find anywhere on Google. But like Uday mentioned, we are working on a project wherein we are trying to estimate the economic value of three ecosystems in Bhubneshwar city with the support of Bhubneshwar Municipal Corporation and IUCN. So I'll give you some examples of how we are trying to simplify this process and use it in the context of urban ecosystems in the city. So before we jump on to that actual example, why is there a need for estimating the economic value of ecosystem services? Why should any decision maker or any official think about this entire concept or this entire research? And that's something that we started thinking about when we started talking to the decision makers. We need to understand what is the benefit from doing this. So A, it helps in making more informed choices about land use, resource management and development projects. Because if you understand the value of an ecosystem in terms of different kinds of services, you can make better decisions for its future development. It helps in adoption of sustainable practices that balance short-term gains with long-term ecological health. So you can move more towards sustainable resource management by actually assessing these values of the ecosystems. It helps in developing policies that really encourage responsible use of ecosystems, conservation of natural ecosystems. You protect the things you have a value for, you can estimate the value for. So that's how you can develop better policies. Again, public awareness and education. Most of our people and the community do not understand ecosystems vis-a-vis all different kinds of services that we are looking at. A layman, for him, a water body is a place wherein probably he can get to see some nature, but nothing beyond that. So we're trying to build public awareness and education in this concept, supporting and estimating the damages caused by the activities that negatively impact the ecosystem. So once we are able to assign a value, we're able to understand how that value changes, increases or decreases, which can help in regulatory or legal support. And the last one is for the shared ecosystems. Such sort of actual calculations can help in negotiations for international agreements that are there to take place. So with that background, coming up to MEA, Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Framework, and anyone who does a quick Google research or Google search about ecosystem valuation or ecosystem services, it'll start first take you to this page, MEA. What is MEA? So MEA was launched by the UN in 2001. And just to understand, it was designed as a concept to assess the consequences of ecosystem change for human well-being, and to act as a scientific basis for action needed to enhance the conservation and sustainable use of those ecosystems. So what it essentially says is every ecosystem has four broad kinds of categories of services. The first one is provisioning services, which are basically tangible benefits that people obtain directly from these ecosystems. Say, for example, we are getting fish from water bodies, clean water from water bodies, wood from forest, or food from forest areas. So these are direct benefits, tangible benefits that we get. The regulating services, which are basically regulations of various environmental features associated with ecosystems. So these ecosystems help in indirect benefits like cool temperatures, controlling flooding, purifying water, storing carbon, cleaner air, all these kind of regulating support that the ecosystems provide. Then the cultural services, which is basically the non-material benefits that we get indirectly from these ecosystems. They are good source for aesthetic value. They are a recreational place for people. Most of the people, you'll ask them, they'll be like, this ecosystem just helps me to give me a recreational space. I can come here for an evening walk. That's a very important value of an ecosystem. Educational tours happen at these ecosystems, so you can learn a lot more about biodiversity and all. So these sort of connect of people with the ecosystem. And the last one are the supporting services, which are fundamental processes that these ecosystems have. So something like soil formation, photosynthesis, and all that are essential for these ecosystems. So going forward, we need to understand each ecosystem with a lens from all these categories of services that I just talked about. And this is essentially the basis of understanding the economic values of ecosystem. So how can we estimate these ecosystem services and their values? I'll give you through an example of how we are doing it for the city of Bhubaneswar. So pick any ecosystem. We need to identify the total economic value of that ecosystem, which essentially comprises of these two categories of values. One is the use value. Use value meaning the direct and indirect benefits that people obtain from using a resource, and the non-use value, which is linked to ecosystems existence and the potential for future use. So it's not directly usable, but it's basically it's existing there, so there is a value associated with it. So it's very simple to calculate the use value, especially use values of two kinds. So there's one called the direct use value, the direct benefits that we get from the use of ecosystem goods or services. Like, for example, a water body, you're directly getting a fish and you can sell it in the market. That's a direct use value. Or maybe a direct recreational benefit. I'm going there, I'm sitting on a water body. That's a direct use value. That is very simple to understand, very simple to see, and very simple to calculate. Then there is the indirect use value, the benefits that we get from the goods and services provided by these ecosystems, the secondary benefits that we cannot directly see. We cannot directly see the carbon sequestration that happens through an ecosystem, but that is a very a huge value that these ecosystems provide. We can't directly see how much groundwater recharge these water bodies are helping with, but that's something that is there. It is very difficult to calculate these indirect use values, but they're very important for the ecosystems. Then coming to the second category, that is the non-use value. Again, a little tricky to understand, but I'll give an example, a simple statement of how you can understand it. So bequest value is basically the value for future generations. So the value associated with an ecosystem, if you are ready to keep it, your willingness to pay to have that ecosystem for the future generation. Say, for example, I want this forest for my next generation to be there because it's going to benefit their health. So I am associating a value with it. I'm willing to pay to protect that ecosystem. So that's essentially bequest value. And existence value is I am willing to pay for this ecosystem to merely exist. The value of existence. I feel secure that I have these green areas, these water bodies. So I'm ready to pay for it. So that kind of value is called existence value. And like I was explaining, it's very difficult to calculate these bequest and existence value. So in most cases, we focus on the direct and indirect use values. And somewhere in between is the option value, which is again as a mere my willingness to pay for this ecosystem to be there as an option for helping me in providing my goods and services. So there's this QR code that you can see on the bottom right. I'll give you a second to scan it in case you want to understand it. And anyone who's new to this, I'll really recommend you to see this. It's a quick YouTube video, a 7-minute video. When I started this research, I started with this video and it clarified all my doubts about these kinds of services. It's a very animated video that you can like easily watch, and it's a quickly understandable video for you to understand the different kinds of services. You can scan the QR code. So with that understanding, we tried to estimate the economics of 3 urban ecosystems in Bhubaneswar. We started with this ecosystem map for the city of Bhubaneswar. So my colleague Bani Brata has developed all these maps for the city of Bhubaneswar. On the right hand side, you can see an ecosystem map of the city. So we have this large river, Daya River, flowing through the city. Then we have the riparian belt along the river. We have these great lush green agriculture areas. We have 3 urban forests within the cities, the dark green area. Then we have a lot of parks and open spaces, the lighter green flowing throughout the city. And we have these purple colored marshes and wetlands in the city. So Bhubaneswar is a mix of a variety of ecosystems. And we did a recce survey to understand the different kinds of ecosystem of Bhubaneswar. Like I mentioned, there are these different types that I mentioned there. And we did a quick assessment of the services provided by these ecosystems. So we went to each of these ecosystems marked on the map, and we tried to understand what kind of different service each ecosystem is providing. So that's how you can start your Excel. In case you want to estimate the economic value of an ecosystem, just identify the ecosystems, go to the site, create such sort of a checklist of each of the services that are provided by the ecosystem. So if you can see, I've put down the checklist for 3 ecosystems. There's this forest that we identified, the Chandaka Bharatpur forest. There's this Bindu Sagar water body for which we did this, and a swamp and marshland in the southern edge of the city. So we went to the site, did a quick recce analysis, and did a quick checklist of what kind of services are provided by the ecosystem. So for me to start valuing it, I need to understand what I need to value. This is essentially giving me this. So I'll give you an example of the Bindu Sagar water body that provided timber, fuel, fiber, the medicinal resources that are there as part of a green area that's adjacent to it, fruits and nuts. Sorry. Fresh water is provided by this ecosystem to the people living in the vicinity of the area. Then there is biodiversity regulation happening as a part of it. It's helping in local climate regulation, carbon sequestration. So I've essentially ticked what kind of services are provided. This is a glimpse of the typical ecosystem services provided by a water body, and this is what we found in our water body as well. So there is this aesthetics or educational value, there's the habitat value, there's a regulation of microclimate, getting fresh water from the water body. It's a habitat for aquatic fauna. There is groundwater recharge happening, erosion control. It's a habitat for other animals, and carbon storage. So it's providing a diversity of values which we are trying to estimate. For each of these service, we've tried to come up with an estimated economic value. And I'll run you quickly through how we have done this, starting with that water body Bindusagar provided fishes for sale and for self-consumption. So this is a direct use value that we are using, and we are calculating it based on simply understanding how much quantum of fishes people are getting. And this we've done through primary surveys and FGDs with people. We've done extensive surveys with people wherein we've gotten all this information. So how much fishes people are getting from this water body, how much quantum they are selling, and on what market price are they selling. A simple understanding of the total quantum of fishes sold and the market price is giving us the market value, the estimated economic value of the fishing service provided by this ecosystem. Then coming to clean water. So basically this water body is a source for water for the surrounding neighborhoods. So we are trying to understand how much quantum of water is being used from this water body and estimating the avoided cost. We call it the avoided cost method. So the cost avoided in providing a similar quantum of water through municipal sources. So how much cost has been avoided in case they had to provide a similar quantum of water to these people in the neighboring settlements. We did a quick satellite mapping of the ecosystem, and what we found out was that the temperature around the water body was cooler than the temperature in general of the city and the areas further away. So we did a quick survey to understand if the cost of electricity due to AC consumption and due to like cooler consumption has reduced in the areas, and we are yet to get the results, but then we tried to estimate how much cost has been avoided due to the cooling effect of the water body. A similar assessment through primary surveys was done for flood control. So what type of flood regulation measures city has to use in general, what is the cost for these flood attenuation measures, and because of this water body being there, the floods are being avoided because this water body is capturing the water from the vicinity. So how much cost is being avoided in terms of flood mitigation measures. Then storing carbon capture. So we using the benefit transfer method wherein we are understanding similar ecosystems in different areas and what quantum of carbon capture they're helping with. For the recreation, we have a number of tourists, approximately more than 90,000 tourists annually that visit this water body. But we were not able to understand because there was no ticketing system for this water body. So what we used was a travel cost method. How much people are willing to spend, or how much people are spending to travel to this water body, from how far they are coming and how much they are spending. So simple valuation methods that are there in research, in theory, we've actually done primary surveys and applied it to come up with actual values of this ecosystem. Coming to the second last one, the tourist and the spirituality value. So because of the cultural and historical significance of the ecosystem, there are a number of tourists that come to this ecosystem. There are a number of puja shops, puja related tourist related shops in the vicinity. So there are a lot of pandits and brahmins that are there. So what kind of income is being generated as a result of these economic opportunities? And the last one is biodiversity, and it is a very tricky thing to calculate in case there are no biodiversity surveys being done. One is you can directly do biodiversity surveys and do a quick counting of what kind of species are there. However, in our case, we did not have that. So we asked people in terms of survey, in terms of their willingness to pay to protect the biodiversity. So people were actually willing to pay to protect the biodiversity. I'll show you some glimpses of the results we got in this kind of surveys we did for 3 ecosystems with approximately 8 to 10 ecosystem services for more than 150 questions. And we did a sample size of 600 to 800. So these many surveys were conducted on site on these 3 ecosystems in Bhubaneswar. And we are getting such huge values that you can see. the results are still being calculated, but this is from the reconnaissance survey that we could estimate. So say, for example, the biodiversity value that I've showed in the last column. So people on an average in a year are actually willing to pay approximately 45 crore Indian rupees to protect the biodiversity. Though these numbers are very questionable and they really depend on the scale of the survey, the sample size and everything. However, we can understand that this ecosystem has a huge economic impact in terms of its biodiversity. Similar goes for the spirituality. So a lot of income is being generated, economic opportunity is being generated as a result of this ecosystem being there. There are a number of Brahmins, hawkers, retail shops working as a result of this ecosystem, and more than 1.5 crore is being generated as a result of these. So we try to estimate and come at actual numbers, and we get to find the actual numbers based on the survey results. This was just based on the pilot surveys. But why? What are we going to do with it? We've calculated these numbers, but what are we going to do with it? If you remember in the beginning, one of the objective was to sensitize the community. So what we are looking at is when someone comes to the ecosystem, he understands the water body in terms of, oh, it's a very pretty place. We're trying to, with the support of the Bhuvneshwar Municipal Corporation, we are trying to have such boards established at these ecosystems, put at these ecosystems, which tell the community more about the services associated with it. If you're going to a water body and you read about it saying 90,000 visitors come here annually, or maybe so many people are getting economic benefits out of it, you're more to understand the ecosystem in a deeper level, and you're more able to associate with it and get attracted towards protecting it. So our objective is to sensitize the community through this through means by means of these boards that we are trying to get as part of this project. And the second one is about the upscaling initiative. So we are trying to come up with a strategic framework for estimating the economic value of an urban ecosystem. It's talking about the ecosystem services, how can you actually calculate it, with the case example of Bhuvneshwar, and talking about these 7 steps that any city, any official, any decision maker can take to actually go through this entire process of estimating the economic value. It gives a step-by-step guide as to how you can do this exercise on your own. It also gives the questionnaires that we had developed for Bhuvneshwar's assessment. We've enclosed those. This we will be launching soon in one of our workshops, probably in May. It's a work in progress, but we'll be coming up with this detailed framework, which will help other cities in doing this estimate.
Thank you, Nikita. I think we hope that with these two brief presentations, we could at least give you some idea in terms of what is ecosystem services, what are the different framework, and what are the practical ways to measure it based on the internationally accepted, approaches or methodologies. But as we initially said, that it's not that simple. As Nikita also explained, it has its own challenges in terms of scale, time, a lot of variables are there. So these are some of the key challenges that we at least understand that they are still existing. One is policies and decisions, particularly in our context, they are still not ecosystem service approach is not in the center. It's still that is lacking in terms of policies and decisions. Also the local stakeholders, I mean, it's a different communities, business entities, or individuals, decision makers, different stakeholders in one setup, much aware. I mean, in awareness in terms of ecosystem services. Of course, we can't say that no one understands the value of a tree or value of a water body, but still why we should protect, what is its needs in terms of the overall issues and challenges that are we are witnessing or going to witness in future in terms of the climate change, in terms of different kind of urbanization paces. So still it's not that particularly, it's not, that's not the pivot around which it is moving. Also indirect services, as we talked about, carbon sequestration, groundwater flow, pollination. I mean the number of indirect services that this ecosystem offers, we still don't know how exactly we measure them, and there are no market pricing about it. Also, a lot of research studies are happening, but uh, they're scattered, as that particular Indian map was showing. It's very scattered, and still a lot of thing has to be done. Of course, urbanization is also very rapid, so land use, land cover change in the urban area changes so fast. I mean, if you visit a place once and then after 1 month you go, you will see a lot of change. So that's actually need also, but that's something which is also risking or threatening the ecosystems. They're rapidly disappearing or dilapidated or polluted or whatever you say. That is one key challenge in that particular scenario. How we approach this ecosystem valuation and other kind of things. There are no standard approaches. We are trying to come up with some framework and approach which officials can, not the researchers. Researchers must have gone to the another spectrum of the work. But when we come to the rapidly adoptable or easily understandable frameworks, still there are no standard approaches, and it's even not easy. And of course, valuation of ecosystem, if you do for 1 day, it will different. It will be for a month, it will be different value, and for a year and years, it will be different. So these are the different things. How we actually normalize and how we come to a very, reasonable kind of a valuation. So these are the some of the things that we are currently witnessing, but the more and more work will happen. I'm sure it will certainly help to make this kind of studies better, more sophisticated. Now, what are the solutions for this? So these three things we would like to put here. One is to inspire. You inspire more and more stakeholders, particularly the decision makers, that sensitize them. Maybe exposure visits are important. Maybe the kind of reports they need to understand, the evidence-based studies, they need to be inspired. Then documentation. A lot of things are happening. I mean, nature-based solutions are being worked, ecosystem-based adaptation practices are approached, communities are helping. Let's document more and more in a more refined way, more in a structured way. So that helps to develop knowledge products which can be used to sensitize, to inspire the target audience. And finally, scale up. You do 1, 2, 3, 10 projects or the studies, and then inspire ultimately to the target stakeholder. So that's the cycle which can really help in future to scale up the ecosystem based adaptation practices, or some meaningful ecosystem valuation that we can do. So here, a simple picture we would like to pose. We have used this. There have been a lot of questions when we use this picture, but can we assign a value to any tree? Can we say this is $1 million, $10 million, or $100 million tree, or for that sake any ecosystem? uh, it's really, it's a hard question. Can we really actually give some assign a dollar value, or a kind of a value to any kind of currency? So that's where we are yet to crack these things. But this was our overall experience, particularly in the urban context, because since NIUA being the urban body, or a planning body, a planning institution, we try to help the cities. So we are also trying to help cities to understand the ecosystem valuation. We see that not today, but down the line 5 years, anything which has to be managed has to be actually understood. Its management requires first valuation of it needs protection, it needs trade-off kind of things, it needs compensation, whatever we think. But the valuation is going to be important aspect in future. And we hope this class, called as a master class, has actually sensitized you, or maybe at least this case study must have helped you to understand what is ecosystem valuation, particularly in the Indian landscape. Thank you very much, Shaurya. We'll stop here and we'll hand it over to you for the next part.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nikita and Uday, for your insightful presentations and also for giving us a clear and practical understanding of ecosystem services. The real world examples you've shared really help ground the concepts, and also we're looking forward to the launch of the strategic framework that you've shared. Now, moving on to the Q&A section. For the first question, let me just. So we have this question that, have you divided the riparian zone of the river? How have you done that, and how have you identified which plants were useful for this specific zone?
Um, Sorry, Shaurya, have you identified the riparian?
How have you divided the riparian zone of the river, and how have you identified that which plants are useful for the specific zone?
Okay, should I?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So basically, as part of this study, this context we haven't, but we are also working on this URMP, Urban River Management Plan framework. And therein, one of the objective is to have a riparian stretch along the river banks. So our colleagues here at NIUA have done this, written this paper as well as to how we can benefit the maximum from different types of riparian stretches. We are looking at a different kind of three zone strategy wherein you have like different kinds of species right adjacent to the river and a tiered plantation from the shrubs to the trees as well. Also, we are looking at longer stretches of riparian because it just does not depend on the width of the riparian stretch. It's also a long riparian stretch that you require. I'll be happy to share a link to the paper which has more insights into the kinds of species. Even in our URMPs, we have suggested certain plantation palettes, which really depends on not just the riparian aspect, the riverine species, but also the character of the city. Each city has a different plantation palette for its riparian buffer. So I'll be happy to share that paper which talks about these riparian stretches, what kind of plantation can happen, and you can also refer to our URMP documents wherein we've actually proposed riparian plantation for different river ecosystems all across India.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. For the next question, did you use the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity framework for your economic evaluation activity?
Yeah, yeah. So we have referred to, in fact, not just this, we've referred to a lot of scientific assessment, a lot of publications. Many institutes have already worked on these aspects in the Indian scenario. We have also had various consultation sessions because we were not experts of this subject when we started. Let me give you a catch here that while we are delivering this master class, we are not experts in ecosystem valuation. However, by virtue of reading a lot of resource material, a lot of research, and consulting with a number of researchers working in this sector, what we've tried to do is simplify the context, the scientific terminology behind all of these frameworks that are there. That can be understandable, that is understandable by our city officials. So we have referred to various documents. When we release this framework, this has a list of various references that we've used to come up with this seven-step methodology. And it has also given references to where we have learned about the different kinds of services, their calculations, and how we've come up with the questionnaires. So it has all the list of the reference materials that we have used.
Sure. Thanks, Nikita, for sharing that. For the next question, was a mapping of potential beneficiaries of the ecosystem surveys carried out, and were they engaged with the project to therefore address their needs or potentially co-invest?
Absolutely. So, you would like to?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can. I can add
So
that.
I'll just give a glimpse of how we did this process. So we started with a recce assessment, a self-observation format, which we prepared for each ecosystem. We'll be having that self-observation in our framework as well. So we did a quick recce assessment of what kind of benefits or what kind of services each ecosystem provides. We also did a quick mapping of what different kinds of stakeholders are benefiting from these ecosystem services. Say, for example, for the Bindusagar water body, we have the Brahmins that are there, the Pandit trust and the religious temple trust that is there. Then we had the fishermen that are there, the fishing community. Then we had the tourists associated with it. We have the people, the vending zones and the vendors associated with it. So we did a quick mapping of the different stakeholders, not just in terms of the community, but also the departments that are benefiting from it. from it. Say, for example, as a result of the ecosystem being there, there's a reduction that we've noticed in the flooding in the area. So we consulted the flood control department as well, the groundwater board. So we've done this stakeholder mapping for each of the ecosystems, and we've conducted separate FGDs and discussions and interviews with each of these stakeholders. That's why I said this 150 plus set of questions were surveyed for more than 600 respondents. So a lot of data was collected in the city, for which we hired local resources. And based on that data, we put forward that these are the results that we are getting. The results might be questionable, but the process is something that we've tried to establish through this, through talking to each of the stakeholder associated with all these ecosystems.
Yeah, thanks, Nikita. I think, see, basically, when we say any urban local body, so for our, purpose, mainly municipal corporation was the prime stakeholder. The other stakeholders were, of course, the line departments and, of course, the state level department also. So two categories: common citizens, visitors, or the people residing nearby any ecosystem. So primary surveys were carried out, FGDs were done, and they were, of course, for a shorter duration. I mean, for 10 days, a morning, afternoon, and also the evening time period. The questions were run for the repetitive same question, but with a different whosoever is available at the ground as a stakeholder. The other thing is all the departments. I'll share one example. In Bhuneshwar, there is one marshy area along the drain, and it is very vulnerable to the encroachment, and it is being encroached. So the corporation, when we discussed this, of course, it was very difficult initially for even us to convince them that something like this. They said, we want to protect this particular ecosystem, or say, for example, this marshland or some land in their particular language. Can you rationalize something? So valuation of ecosystem kind of things, if we have a very rational methodology or approach which can convince to the urban local body officials, this also can protect the ecosystem. I mean, in terms of encroachment, in terms of, which is very common in the urban areas. So that's where these kind of things would help, and that's where we are trying to, uh, as Nikita said, we are trying to make it very simple for the citizens. There must be scientific groups, there must be, researchers who are in depth working, but how a city officials or how urban local body officials can actually understand it, and that's where we attempted this particular thing. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for answering that. Moving on to the next question. This is an interesting one. How to deal with the overestimated values in ecosystem valuation?
Yes. So that's possible because, maybe if say, for example, we are estimating a fish catch, right, from any water body, there could be, responses in terms of its prices, which are inflated prices or overpriced, or the market value could be also varying. So basically, the more and more you collect the information or the information, we can homogenize that information in terms of the value. But yeah, that's always a risk, and also there could be a negative values as well. As I mean, valuation cannot be always a positive, but it could be a negative valuation also.
And just to add on, overestimation in our case was also happening as a result of double calculation of
Yep.
any particular service. So, say for example, there is a direct benefit from an ecosystem, and similar that benefit is also resulting in an indirect benefit. So, you need to ensure that your questionnaires are strong enough to, and the calculation methodology is strong enough to ensure that we are not double counting on these services that you might face when you do actual service. But otherwise, like Uday mentioned, there is a potential for overestimation or underestimation also, I might say. In many cases, in terms of willingness to pay, there are people are a little hesitant in responding. So there are chances wherein we are getting underestimation scenarios as well. However, it really depends on how efficient your surveys are going, how much time you are giving giving to the respondents to response, how you're filtering out these values. Because when you understand or assess the quantum of responses, you are able to understand the different responses and the diversity of it. So you need to do a self-assessment, and you need to filter out the responses and get to the actual values. Still, you might not be able to get the accurate values per se, but you can actually reduce the number of assumptions and filter out the responses to get the best possible
Yeah.
results.
Also, I will add, like, for valuation kind of approaches, there could be one extreme end of a very scientific and very meticulous analysis and approaches that you take. The other thing is you do the surveys, you talk to people, you investigate on the ground. So this both end has its own advantages and disadvantages. So somewhere maybe a midway need to be adopted, where you do the you also not miss out the scientific and the other aspect also, and also you don't miss the ground information. So somewhere that delicate balance is required in terms of ecosystem valuation.
Thank you both for answering that. We will be taking up two more questions given the time constraints. We have a lot of interesting questions coming in. Do you also have a set of indicators or a framework to track the change in the ecosystem services that can inform urban development planning dynamically?
So not so far, to be very honest, and
Yeah.
we did this research as to if there are any existing frameworks that can help you identify these. Though there are a number of existing tools to identify or to map the quantum of different services. Say, for example, there are available tools like Invest and all, which help you understand the carbon sequestration value. So specific tools to address different kinds of ecosystem services, they're available in open domain. However, we could not come across any simple tool wherein you can estimate the change or even estimate the quantum of ecosystem services. The study that we did, the methodology that we followed, we are putting it in a framework, a 7-step method, and we will be launching it soon. Though it does not directly talk about the change per se of the economics of ecosystem. However, it's a good idea. Maybe if we continue the research on this subject, we would be happy to like dive deeper into these aspects as well.
Right. And also, when we say ecosystem valuation kind of a things, see, there are two ways. One is, I mean, why someone do this particular thing. So, for example, is if some development project is coming and some forest or some tree is to be removed, and that they need to be replanted somewhere. So we try to perhaps estimate that particular value of that particular patch, and then we see how we can compensate it with with its replanting in some other place. For us, that was not the purpose. We are not evaluating any ecosystem for any kind of these kind of balancing kind of thing. Our purpose is, if someone wants to protect the ecosystem, or urban local body wants to protect the ecosystem, what is the simplest approach? What is the approach that can be taken up? That was our primarily approach to do the methodology on and kind of a assessment.
Great, thanks for answering that. For the next question, we have what are your views about the design of NBS management models on the basis of or based on the valuation of the ecosystem? And also to supplement that, like, what are your views on financing urban NBS based on this valuation methodology?
Right. So here I would like to share that when we say nature-based solutions, nature-based solutions are perhaps basically in general they mimic the basic natural processes. Say, for example, wetland does the filtration or the wastewater treatment in a natural way. When we say constructed wetland, it's a miniatured approach. So we are mimicking the nature to derive some benefits or to do some functions. So nature-based solutions are usually adopted in terms of either protecting or or kind of managing a dilapidated ecosystem, natural systems. But when we say ecosystem valuation, perhaps it's a slightly different domain. So nature-based solutions, usually we believe that works at a different scale. Say, for example, site-specific scale nature-based solution will have a different function and different outputs, whereas valuation kind of approaches are altogether different kind of approaches.
Agreed. If you have 5 minutes more, I can take up one more question. Just wanted to confirm, Nikita. No, there.
Yeah.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Sure. This is an interesting question in terms of Odisha. So Odisha is enriched with a significant amount of natural resources, including minerals, forests, and water bodies. However, the state continues to lag behind others in effectively utilizing these resources for sustainable economic development. So, what are the key challenges hindering this progress, and how can the integration of nature-based approaches or ecosystem-based adaptation contribute to improving the total economic value of Odisha's natural capital while also ensuring long-term ecological and social benefits? Like a big question, but yeah, if you could share that.
Yeah, so maybe first let me respond, and Nikita also and add that. So Odisha is one of the state which is least urbanized as far as our reading goes. It's still not that urbanized, and it has still a very pristine area. Then even the traditional practices are being done, and there are some even the rural areas which are still following the traditional practices, and it has a lot of natural assets, as you rightly said. But at the same time, some of the urban centers like Bhubaneswar and Cuttack and Puri and other kind of places which are rapidly urbanizing. So Odisha's forest and climate change department, because we also interacted with them, and we were very much surprised the kind of a knowledge they have. I mean, there are very nicely developed urban parks in the city. There's a place called Jaydev Vatika. I mean, many of you might be knowing it. So the forest department, I mean, particularly the corporation, forest corporation, they have over the period of 25 years developed it in a very lush and green and also very dense kind of a kind of a urban green space within the developed urban area. They were also not much thinking in terms of its value capturing. I mean, they were even not thinking about, despite they being a very good scientist with whom he interacted. So they were saying that yes, we can certainly do the carbon sequestration or a carbon capture kind of things. We are planning for that. They are also thinking that they will take some other areas to develop kind of ecosystem. So in terms of urban areas, these 2 3 urban areas that we interacted with the officials, as far as the natural conservation is concerned, they are very much into it, but they are still not in terms of valuation and other things. So there is a lot of scope in Odisha that to say that.
Just to add to what Uday was saying, and just to continue on that, while the forest department or the environmental department, they are looking at or talking about these aspects, there's a clear gap in terms of Odisha's understanding when it comes to the other municipal departments. So the people who are actually developing the sites, it is very essential to for them to understand this concept, and that is where I tell the main gap lies. Not just in terms of Odisha, we've done a study in Bhubaneswar. However, I feel that's a gap, key gap in many cities, is that understanding of the critical stakeholders who are working in the municipal corporation, their understanding of what ecosystem services are, how it can benefit them, how can they estimate the quantum of it, and just for them to understand that these are huge ecosystem services and values which they need to protect. We are very far from that angle A. And the second gap that is there is in the understanding and the capacity of the community in general. So people and their understanding of the ecosystem and these services. And that is what we are targeting through these two gaps we are targeting through this project. We're trying to build the capacities of ULBs by simplifying this technically very strong concept, very niche subject. We're trying to simplify it and take it to the officials for them to understand this concept, take it within their development framework. And we're trying to simplify the learnings from these, the outcomes from these surveys and all, put it on a board out there for the community to read more about it, to learn more about it.
So also Odisha has a state action plan. they have a state action plan, two-stage action plan. Previously, previous plan is over and now it's up to 2030. So it has also touched upon the urban sector, and particularly this particular forest and urban greens and other things. So there is some way they have touched upon this things, but the way in which we understand the valuation of ecosystem services, and sometimes we also believe when we interact with the officials, they may not be aware about these terminologies perhaps, but in other way, one or the other way, they are doing these things. For example, nature-based solutions or water-sensitive urban design and planning that we talk usually, they do these things, but perhaps they are not aware that they are doing these things. So these are also things. So the state action plan has touched upon this aspect, but not with say kind of a valuation or ecosystem service valuation and other kind of things. Uh, yeah.
Thank you for answering that. Just taking up this one last question. The continued delivery of value of services depends also on the health of the stock. So, how is the health of the capital growth or degradation being done or taken into consideration?
Right. So what I understand from your question is when we say any ecosystem, how healthy it is, right? And then we do the valuation and how much dilapidated it is. So as far as our ecosystems that we selected, so we selected the Bindusagar water body. So it did not have that pollution load or that kind of things into in the observation, and also the Jaidev Vatika that we took. It did not have. However, there was one which was a drain, a natural drain. It had these kind of things, but I think very honestly speaking, we have not considered those things. Nikita, anything?
Yeah, just to add, just to understand it broadly, what we did was a baseline assessment in the beginning. That's where we began our surveys with. We understood the ecosystems, the kind of services, its baseline, and that's how we built on it. But again, like Uday mentioned, that there is a potential for deep diving into this concept. We through this exercise, we tried to touch the surface of it to establish a methodology, to simplify the methodology for everyone to understand. However, the detailed assessments can still be done with more scientific processes.
Of course, we are when we are saying we are trying to develop some methodology or some simple approach for the city officials. Of course, we'll do some more consultations with the expert also. We have some experts working with us, and they are helping in terms of questionnaires and refinement of the methodology and this framework that we are doing. Environmental economists we have with us, and we'll certainly do the consultation. But and nonetheless, what Nikita said, I'll also reiterate that this is one approach. This is one thing that as an institution we thought that let's experiment with this, and we don't know how much we have succeeded or how much we have even scratched the surface or not, but yes, so these are the things someone has to start. I mean, a lot of research is happening, but how much it can help in terms of taking some decision, that is the overall idea here in terms of what we are doing.
Thank you, Uday and Nikita, for those thoughtful responses. A big thank you as well to our participants for joining us and for your active engagement during the Q&A. We hope this session has sparked new ideas, questions, and also collaborations. The recording of today's session will be shared to the registered email addresses. That is all for now, and we will look forward to seeing you at our next masterclass. Until then, take care, everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, WRI Shaurya. And still, we will again repeat that rather than masterclass, we took it as a webinar. I mean, that's what I would say. And we tried to share what we have been doing. Of course, we are also learning. But thank you so much, WRI and all the participants. I hope there must be a lot of participants who must be having a much advanced knowledge and also knowing more. So thank you so much for listening to us and giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.